"2015 is an important year for the Russian land forces for a variety of reasons. They're around half the way through now their state armaments program, which covers the period 2010 to 2020. As we see the program developing, they've been receiving a whole series of vehicles previously based on existing designs, such as the T-90, which is originally derived from the T-72, the BMP-3, which is a derivative of the BMP-2, itself a derivative of the BMP-1, and they've been using the BTR-82A, which is itself a derivative of the BTR-80. Now, looking forward into this year and beyond, they're going to be receiving a whole new suite of vehicles, which ground-up designs, not at all based on the legacy platforms. Actually, it's the first time we've seen this happen for the Russian land forces since the 1960s, really, when those BMP-1 and those series of vehicles came into service. We don't know much about the vehicles that are coming in to replace them, and they'll be debuted for the first time on the May 9th Victory Day parade in Moscow. What we do know is the T-90 and the T-72B3 will eventually be phased out with a new main battle tank known as the Armata. Now, that won't just be a main battle tank, it'll form a whole new heavy armoured chassis suite for a whole range of vehicles, not just the main battle tank, but also artillery systems, a heavy armoured fighting vehicle. Little details are known about it, but we expect to see it on the May 9th Victory Day parade. Something we do know about it is it's expected to have a 125mm main gun, which is in keeping with the previous series of Russian tank designs. There had been some suggestion they might shift to a 140mm or possibly even a 152mm main gun, but at the moment it seems like they're sticking with the 125. In addition, we expect it to be armed with a coaxial 30mm automatic cannon, which is quite a big improvement in terms of capability for any armoured vehicle. Something else we expect it to have is also have an unmanned turret, which will be the first main battle tank in national service to have an unmanned turret. The next new vehicle, which will replace the BMP series, is going to be known as Kurganets. It'll make its debut at the May 9th Victory Day parade. It'll weigh around 25 tons, which is quite an increase on the BMP-3 or BMP-2, which is replacing. The latest and most heavily armoured BMP-3 series tank, infantry fighting vehicle, weighs around 20 tons, or just under 20 tons, so it's quite a big increase in weight. Now, that's expected to be armed with a 57mm automatic cannon, which again is an interesting shift, because if you look at the BMP-3 series, that was armed with a 30mm cannon and a 100mm low recoil gun, which is a shift from the BMP-2, which is armed with just a 30mm cannon, or the BMP-1 even, which is armed with a 70mm recoilless gun. So there's quite a bit of variance there in what the Russian army are doing with their infantry fighting vehicle armaments. And that'll replace the BMP-3 series. If you look at the wheeled vehicles, the BTR-80, 82 series and 70M series, they're going to be replaced with a new 8x8 armoured fighting vehicle known as Boomerang. Again, not much is known about that, but that's expected to make its debut at the Victory Day parade as well on May the 9th. And that's expected to be armed with the same 57mm cannon as the Kurganets series of vehicles. They're also looking to partially replace the BTR-80 series with a new suite of 6x6 armoured vehicles and MRAPs to be known as Typhoon. They're currently understood to be two main configurations of Typhoon, one in an MRAP configuration, one with an APC configuration. The Russian Land Forces artillery systems are also due for a similar makeover, with a new self-propelled artillery system coming in, a replacement for the 2S-19, also known as the Mr. S system. And that's expected to be known as Koalitia, or Coalition. There was some system under the Koalitia name under development for some time, which had an unusual two-barreled ordnance system. But at the moment, that was based on a T-72 chassis, T-90 chassis. But at the moment, the plan is for the Russian Armed Forces to replace it with a new Koalitia system with a single-barreled ordnance based on the Armata chassis. There have been some suggestion that perhaps the Russians might shift to a NATO standard 155mm main gun, as that would help its successes on the export market, which is something the Chinese have looked to do recently. But all the indications are at the moment they'll stick with a 152mm main gun. In addition, included in the Russian Land Forces infantry are tactical ballistic missile systems, with the Russian Land Forces receiving the Iskander 2020, which comprises around 120 launchers. Bringing all these vehicles into service and putting them into full-scale production is going to prove an interesting problem for the Russian defence industrial base, which is already slightly struggling from effects of corruption, economic issues, as well as also to a certain degree sanctions on export of components to it, although it doesn't particularly affect the Russian land forces as much. In particular, they're going to have to gear up to building all these new vehicles. When you look at the State Armaments Programme 2010-2020, they were already falling behind on what they were looking to do. They were looking to receive around 2,300 main battle tanks, around 2,000 self-propelled artillery systems, and a whole range of other vehicles to modernise the Russian land forces to up to around the kind of 70% margin in Russian parlance by 2020. Now, at the end of 2014, the assessment that the Russian General Command made was that they were only at around 34%. So about halfway through, they were not quite. They were just a little bit behind schedule. Now, obviously, as they look to create all these new vehicles and scale up production, we expect to see that fall off a little bit further. Something that is interesting to note with the new vehicles that are coming in is they appear to certainly emphasise armour protection and crew survivability far greater than in previous designs. Particularly if you look at the scaling up in armour protection and in terms of the weight and gross vehicle tonnage on the Kurganets vehicle, as we understand it over the BMP series, that certainly emphasises armour protection, as well as the armoured turret. Russian tank designs in the past have certainly been known for having not particularly safe ammunition storage capabilities within the hull and within the turret. So moving into an unmanned turret should hopefully make the vehicle itself more survivable, rather than having the legacy kind of Soviet and Russian tank designs exploding the way they do, as you see in Ukraine or Iraq or Syria or wherever else it may be. Overall, though, the vehicles should provide a big increase in capability with the new armament systems, new armour package, or new armour packages that they involve should provide a significant improvement on the battlefield. But they will come at the expense of cost and complexity and weight.